Nancy is a passionate THR advocate and executive coordinator of the Coalition of Asia Pacific Tobacco Harm Reduction Advocates, or CAPHRA, as you all may know. She has been involved in the consumer tobacco harm reduction movement in New Zealand since 2014, when she co-founded Aotearoa Vapors Community Advocacy. When a scientific journal makes an accusation and then puts a small disclaimer saying, we have no proof, this is just what we are saying, is that appropriate behavior?
Okay, I'm in an interesting position because I also worked in scientific research back in the United States. I was a research administrator. So I understand a lot more about funding mechanisms and bias, the court of public opinion, how things are played in the court of public opinion, which happens to be, in this case, not just the journal and what they're doing to Assad, but also in the media and in newspapers throughout the region. We're in a very interesting situation. I'll touch upon the situation with Assad first, okay, with the British Medical Journal and that article, okay. Those people, when people do scientific research, I'm going to try to make this as simple as possible, a very not simple thing. When people do scientific research, the normal method for doing that, it's called the scientific method. You have a hypothesis, which is your question. Then you develop a method, and that method will either prove or disprove whatever your question is, and then you supply your results, okay, based on your method. Now, what is happening, what we suspect is happening, because I don't want to get nailed with a libel case, is that depending on where the funding is coming from, is the bias or the skew for the science and what those results may be. Now, in the situation with what ACE is dealing with, those people come from a very well-known organization that gets funding from the Bloomberg philanthropies through the union, okay? There are organizations out there, they're like pseudo-scientific organizations, I guess would be the best way to explain it. And their main goal is to promote anti-THR simply because they either A, they come from a quit or die background, or B, there are things going on in the background that aren't public knowledge yet that suit certain vested interests, okay? And what is happening is not just that, but on the flip side of that is a lot of these scientists and a lot of these anti-THR people in that field, they presumed the consumers were dumb. They presumed that we were just, whatever, just on the uneducated, unwashed masses, let's put it that way. And they're coming up against people who have science backgrounds and people who have professional backgrounds. And, they're not, this is not a fad. These are educated people that are making informed choices and have done their own research. They see this as a threat. We are a threat to them. We are a threat to what we would call their shtick, their routine. A lot of these people, they do tobacco control, quit or die. This is a lifetime gig for them. They just want, if they're in university, they just want to get to their point of tenure or pension and move on. Okay, this is now changing the paradigm. This is now changing the way things always worked, and people don't like change. This is where I think a lot of the attacks are coming from. They're attacking people that don't go, it's either my way or the highway. And they think that the consumers, it's an easy mark. They don't expect us to fight back, but we are. And that makes us even scarier to them. Now, in our region, in Asia Pacific, there are a couple of other aspects that are going on that I'm not sure you've covered before or you've discussed with people before. But we're also the region with the most government-owned tobacco manufacturing and production. And that plays into the very high smoking rates in the region. And that also plays into the government's not wanting, again, tobacco harm reduction, because now that affects the government purse. So it seems black and white, but it's not. It's very complicated, and it kind of spins around, and everything feeds into everything else. So the point of CAPHRA and the point of all of us working together is like, for example, yes, I'm in New Zealand, and yes, I'm in a very lucky position. But it took us 6 years and longer. There are people fighting for this, for 10 years to get us where we are now. But we had scientists on board. We had researchers on board. We had the government on board. We have the Ministry of Health on board. We're very lucky. But there was a lot of work that went into that. Okay. And there's also, New Zealand doesn't have any tobacco interests. We don't have any government-owned tobacco manufacturing interests. Okay. That helped. But in order to be able to fully understand what's going on, you have to look at the bigger picture. And the bigger picture in Asia Pacific is governments are heavily invested and involved in the production, manufacture, and sale of tobacco. We also, our indigenous folks, the Maori, have the high, and the Pacific peoples have the highest smoking rates. But they also happen to be the most economically disadvantaged as well. And that's the other thing that comes in about nicotine. I'm trying to keep this so simple, but it's so complicated. You know, a lot of people use nicotine as a stress relief. So a lot of the people that are smoking, you know, people say you're addicted to nicotine, but nicotine gives them a certain benefit that they can't get from something else. So when you have people that demonize nicotine, you're demonizing those same people. I mean, we have some of the highest tobacco taxes in the world. I think Australia beats us. But, you know, now you have people that are living on social welfare that are using, you know, 60% of their benefit to be able to get the relief that they get from nicotine. And the government saw that, and the government's like, no, there's got to be a better way. So that's what we're working on. But, you know, again, it comes back down to the complications of all the different aspects that play into this. Because across the ditch, like you mentioned, in Australia, they look at nicotine, and nicotine's a bad guy. They don't even think about the combustion aspect. So right. In our region, we have all these different things going on. So life is kind of complicated. But the short answer, I guess, if there is a short answer, is everything is not what it seems. You have to get down below the surface to see what's really going on. We have to humanize this issue, and it's very difficult in countries where it's banned and you're under threat of being thrown in jail or fines. But government officials and public health officials, you know, they need to understand these are people. I think they've dehumanized us because in their mind we're all numbers. We as advocates have to humanize it in our patch. We have to show these are people. We have people here. You know, there's one guy here, Tom, smoked for 47 years. And he picked up a 12 meg mouth to lung kit menthol, and he was off the cigarettes in a week. That's the stuff that we need to promote. That we have to humanize it. That's what we need to do.